Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to this Zeald webinar, the 20th actually, in our Keep Calm and Get Digital series. My name is Jarrah, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. In the current business environment, it's critical to have an online presence. We've talked about this quite a bit at our webinar series over the last couple of months, but what we're actually seeing in real life is that there are e-commerce sites booming out there at the moment and setting record numbers. And so with people launching new websites and the influx of visitors online, today's topic is absolutely critical. Website security, keeping your business and customers safe. Today's guest speaker is the incredible Lisa Meyer, Client Services Manager at Zeald. Lisa is at the forefront of delivery of Zeald websites and has unique insight into today's topic from helping launch and manage hundreds of websites. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you haven't joined one of these webinars before and you can't hear me right now, there are some audio settings right here so that you can change your settings if you can't hear anything. Otherwise, there are the raise a hand and the Q&A buttons that are really important as well. Feel free to enter Q&A questions through this Q&A module at any point during the webinar, and if it's appropriate, I will introduce that question during the discussion, or otherwise we will hold those to the end and answer them during the Q&A section that we do have. We are recording the session, and so it will be available online. If you miss anything, feel free to catch up on YouTube with that later on. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Lisa to share her screen and join us today. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Jarrah. How are you going?
Good, thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me here today. No, I'm very interested to be presenting this. So website security is an integral aspect of owning a website, and in our experience, it is often the most overlooked or placed at least at the lowest priority. So website security does range from protecting your website against the dreaded risk of hackers and cyber attacks, but it's also around having some best practices in place to know what you can do to keep your business and customers' data safe. So I know a couple of the items on the list I've added in today are what people should also be considering for their own personal accounts. So I think sometimes that's forgotten as well. So today what we will be covering is some general website security. So just a few things that you should be doing. SSL certificates, two-factor authentication and what that is, policies and regulations, as well as customer data. So some of the practices that we will cover today may also seem like common sense, but that's because we're looking at them in isolation. If you combine thinking about these while you're trying to run a website and a business and tackling all the other tasks that you have within a day, they are often forgotten. So if you put a few of these practices into place now, or at least as part of your initial setup of your website and processes, it may simplify what you need ongoing. So first up, we have hosting and backup. So most of the time, these items are what you will be needing to consider when you are either first setting up a website or if you are looking to change provider. However, depending on the size of your business or your business practices, this may be something that is frequently reviewed. So one thing that you need to look to do is, choose a secure and reliable hosting service or provider here. So it is just your first step in protecting yourself in the digital world. A good host or provider will have systems in place to stop cyber attacks or hackers at the server level. So that is, I guess, one step further behind your website. There's the website level that people can get into, and then there's actually the server level. So a good provider will stop it at that server level. You also don't need to be technical to sort of understand it all, but you should at least ask the questions or have some information around this from your provider. But also be aware that, data centers and these providers often have a lot of their information locked down because their whole point is security and safety. So don't expect to get all the nitty-gritty. So for example, I know at Zeald, what we can let you know is we've got measures in place to protect from DDoS attacks, which is when a bunch of traffic gets sent towards a website to basically overload it and take it offline. But what we can't tell you is what they are. Otherwise, essentially, we're just giving across that information that would then allow someone who would want to do that to be able to go and get through all our layers there of what we've got in place. But what we can tell you, for example, with Zeald, is that we use Amazon Web Services. That's who we're using, and they're also a massive provider in this space. And although I don't have the stats right now, they probably have a large share of the market. And not just for websites, they host database applications, everything for people. So they are quite often a solution for companies.
And it's probably just worth noting as well that hacking is not just something that happens in the movies. It actually has it's pretty phenomenal the rate at which these sort of attacks are happening. I think even just in the news earlier on this week, there was an attack to one of the big breweries down in the South Island, and they had to shut down production because they got attacked. And so it's something that happens, and we are seeing more and more of it as time goes on, as the tools available for hacking become more and more readily available. Yet sometimes it's just kids playing around even. It's not always really that malicious, but it is happening more and more frequently. I just thought
yeah, definitely. I mean, it just makes me remember, so I do game, I'm a gamer. Someone gets annoyed at me because I'm doing better than them in a game, and they actually DDoS me off being able to play online. So then I have to reset my router and log back in. So, you know, I'm not a major business. I'm not actually a threat to anyone or anything, but people will do it in the smallest instances as well. So it's a bit more common these days.
Yeah, and sometimes the hacking is just for a little bit of digital graffiti, if anything. It's like the modern equivalent of spray painting on a fence is going in and messing up someone's website. Sometimes it's as simple as that, but you just got to be aware that these sort of things can happen. And it's always after the fact that you start looking at security, which is why it's so important what you're saying today.
Awesome. Good analogy there with the digital graffiti. I'll use that. And so the next bit is around website backup. So it's important to know when and how frequently your website is backed up. So most common is probably a nightly backup. It might not always be a full backup. It might be a partial backup. And then that would be followed by either a full weekly or a full monthly backup of your website. And then also if it's free, as part of your hosting, or is it something that you're actually having to pay for individually? So for like an and just to give you an idea of when you might need a backup, for open source platforms such as WordPress, this will help if your website has been hacked and you need to quickly restore it to the previous version before then, and obviously get rid of maybe what was left on your website. For other proprietary websites though, such as like the Zest platform or Shopify and things like that, it might be that you actually were just in there doing some edits on your customer database and accidentally deleted a whole bunch of clients or orders. And so therefore then we would use a backup to restore it to the previous version before that happened. But again, beware, like they most likely are daily. So you could have maybe lost a little bit of change info you had that morning. But most of the time we can then capture other details as well before and merge them. But coming, I guess, really free or paid, this really does loop back to what I sort of just said around the open source and proprietary and what the reason is. So most providers in the space should be offering some sort of backup for your website under a free or part of hosting. But then there may actually be a cost to use the backup. So you actually need it now. On your website, you need it rolled back to last night because there's been a little oops and someone accidentally deleted a whole bunch of stuff. So you may actually be paid to have that rolled back and set up, because that is obviously taking up development time quite often. So that's just, I guess, some differences there. Cool, I guess, and then that perfectly leads into sort of keeping your website up to date. So it's very important to keep your website up to date. And again, it's just going through this proprietary platform. So we're talking Zest, Shopify, Squarespace, Wix. These are just some examples. So often they have base updates as part of their hosting package that you'll have with them. And that means all the standard functionality is actually updated in maybe weekly, monthly, quarterly updates that the developers of these platforms will be rolling out. But what it does mean as well, though, if issues arise on any custom work or add-ons that you perhaps purchase for your website that aren't actually part of that standard functionality, then those might need some maintenance budget to fix or keep updated because they're not actually part of that standard platform. When you come to open source though, and keeping it up to date, so now I'm talking about WordPress and Magento. So these open source platforms do slightly raise your risk of security vulnerability. So it is important to sort of maybe have a better look at this if you are on an open source platform. But you're going to be looking to keep it up to date through using plugins sorry, let me take that back. Messed up my words. So your web, if you're adding plugins to your website, use ones that are frequently updated by the developers of those plugins. So that's one way to keep it secure. And then update those plugins when required, or have some sort of maintenance budget with your provider to do that for you. So that's going to be really important there.
Do you mind if I just point out a little piece here to put some context into this, because I think it's a really, really critical point you're talking about, and that is that these open source platforms, they're kind of like Windows, right? Your Windows system that you've got, your computer that you're running, it's constantly getting updates for security. Open source website pieces of software will have to do the same thing as well. And as they're going through those update processes, the plugins that you have are going to need to update as well. And so you need to make sure that I think as Lisa says, as you're picking those plugins, look for ones that get frequently updated so that they're compatible with those patches that are deployed. It's critical. Right? If you leave a WordPress site without updating it for a couple of years, you're going to be incredibly vulnerable to hacking attempts.
Definitely. And I was also adding a little bit of a warning here though, in particular with open source. So updating plugins can also be risky. So if you actually don't feel comfortable doing it, my best advice is to get someone to help. And talk with your provider, or find a provider that can help you in this space. But also be aware that not every update needs to be done. And again, this is where sometimes if you're not feeling comfortable doing it yourself, it is best to leave it with experts in the industry. Because I think it was about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, WordPress did an update release for their WordPress platform. So the actual platform, what you would consider standard. And I know we at Zeald, we didn't release it. And the reason that was because people who did immediately noticed a security issue. So they quickly rolled them back, and we just held off because we were not going to update our database with this, knowing that there was a security risk in there. So we actually just waited for the new update that I know WordPress worked on quite quickly to then start updating our platform. So that's just something to be wary of there as well. Not every update is necessary. And that's why sometimes it's better to be working with a provider to know what to do there. Great. And now one that might seem a bit silly, but it's probably the most frequently forgotten one, and the one personally I know that I can be bad with. I know some of my Gmails have the same password. So keep your passwords secure. Just as you would your bank account details, you should keep them very, very secure. So things to help with this is create a mix of random special characters. So, your exclamation mark, your @ symbol, your hashtag, letters and numbers for your passwords. You should refrain from using the same password for multiple accounts. And one way to get around that is you could use variations of it if you're worried about forgetting them. There's actually a lot of great tools, in particular on the computers now, that let you save passwords. I mean, Google browser, Chrome does it automatically for you. And so you can end up having quite complex ones, but again, it's then keeping your computer passwords safe and away from everyone. In particular for websites, limit the number of admin users to the website. And so don't just give it to everyone in the business. And if someone does need to access it, and that it's a one-off thing, then maybe remove them straight away. So have a policy around passwords is an important thing if you are having a few different admin users. But also, if someone leaves, have a policy in place to delete or change the password immediately. I'm not saying that everyone's out there going to do bad things, but it's just one of those things that can be forgotten. And if something happens later on, or someone else got a hold of that person's details for some reason, you know, they then have access, and that's not what you want. It would just be like how maybe you'd change the locks if you moved house. So you wouldn't just keep the old locks hoping that the old owners would never ever find a key and come back. So with that as well, my expert tip here, because I do have a couple of these today, is also not to send an email with both a username and password in it when it's going to be able to access live data. So this one, I think, is just like how you wouldn't give someone your credit card number and your PIN number and the CSV number for your credit card all in one email. You would either do it through a payment gateway, or, you know, if it's someone you know and they've got your EFTPOS card but they don't have your PIN, you might text them the PIN separately or something. It's keeping this information separate, because sometimes this is what people are looking for. And so I know, like for us, sometimes for our real development sites that aren't live and have no information in it, we do sometimes send this email with the details in it. But, you know, if it was your live site, we would be separating out what you've got in there. And it's, I guess, extra tip here: change your password once you've been given one. Yeah.
And when setting a password, another good tip is actually to write a sentence, because it's easier to remember and it's very long. So you could write quite a long sentence and it increases your security, but it doesn't make it difficult to remember.
So instead of like using your birth date, you could say my birthday is.
Yeah, I was born on this date in this year. And that's a pretty complicated password for someone to try and crack, but you should be able to remember it.
That's pretty cool. Good idea. Yeah. So now we've sort of covered off some real general website settings. I am just going to go into a few more, I guess, heading towards that technical stage of them. I just realized that that's on my top screen. So the first is SSL certificates. So what are they? Well, yeah, long form, secure socket layers, means not a lot to me, but it's a way of encrypting and decrypting data on your website to make the information that is processed through it safe and secure. So basically jumbling everything up. And simply put, it's really used for transactions that might require credit card details or other highly confidential information that is shared through forms. So think your inquiry form, we do consider your customer's data highly confidential. And so it's just going to secure it while it's getting passed through your website and through into the back end, and, you know, protecting the user.
Do you mind if I just give an example of a common hijacking technique here that we've actually heard of a lot in New Zealand that this prevents? And so if you were say a building contractor and someone filled out an inquiry form and gave you their name, their email address and their phone number when they inquired about getting some work done, right? If that was able to be intercepted because you didn't have an SSL certificate, what a lot of people will do is harvest that information, or hackers will do, not a lot of people, sorry, let me be clear there. They'll harvest that information and then they will actually pretend to be emailing that person from the company itself. Maybe they've got copies of what their quotes and invoices look like, and they will replicate those and put their own bank details on there. Then they will represent it being the company with an invoice that needs to be paid into their own account and actually hijack payments in that way. And you've basically just, by simply not securing contact information that's being shared from a customer to you, you're leaving yourself open to that. That's pretty common. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I've heard about it a lot. So.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I mean, you can think about, you know, when people get those random phone calls from, oh, you need these updates, you know, it's most likely that somehow that your information's been leaked somewhere overseas and, you know, they've gotten that info to call you.
Yes.
That's what you've got to think about here. So now we know what an SSL certificate is. Why should your business worry about having one? So not only to protect and secure the information between your website and server, but it also helps you create a better impression with your SSL certificate. Google will show and tell people that their site is not secure. So you can go to a page that doesn't have an SSL and it'll go, this page is not secure. Do you actually want to proceed? You might be at risk of some data, you know, being stolen, etc. So, you know, this is how you're going to create the right impression by them actually landing on your homepage instead of landing on this page where Google's telling you that it's not secure. And so therefore it may stop them coming to your site right then, but also in future, because they might not give you a second chance unless they know you.
Pretty hard to build trust when Google itself is saying this site is not secure, please don't proceed.
Yeah, definitely. It also gives you a minor ranking boost. So Google, again, are trying to benefit you for having this in place, and it's something they did 2 years ago now, I think. So there is a minor ranking boost for like search engine optimization purposes in there. And further along that line, it does remove a break in the referrer tracking in Google Analytics. So if you're getting quite into your Google Analytics and tracking what people are doing on your site through that, it is important for that as well. Expert tip here as well. So basically with an SSL, you do get what you pay for. So there are, obviously it is actually a market that has quite a lot of offerings in it, from people who are offering $0, $1 SSL certificates through to the more expensive $100, $200, $500 certificates. So cheap isn't always better. So it's best to get advice if you're not sure. Some details just you can look at is encryption strength. So making sure that's quite strong in there, and also warranty details. So is there a warranty should something fail on that? Just another little thing there to look for, which I didn't add in, is also how frequently it renews. So quite often it should be 1 to 2 years. But if you're finding one and it's every week or every month, then I'd say it's probably not the best SSL to be on. For your website at least, I should say. Great. And now we move into two-factor authentication. So what is that? Two-factor authentication basically is adding an extra layer of protection to websites on top of the usual username and password authentication. So it confirms users' identities through a combination of 2 different factors. So maybe your username and password on your website, and then you might also get a text message to then go into this code onto the website. So sometimes you get it from the bank when you're trying to transfer money. We'll send you an SMS as well so that you can enter this code in. I know I have two-factor authentication on my emails, so I do get an email going, please confirm this was you. You can also have a code there. So now I've just pretty much ruined my next slide because I've already started talking about it. So common types of two-factor authentication, so hardware tokens. So these are actually little tokens you'll walk around with. I know the banks used to do this a lot more, but they'll just have a code that maybe changes every 30 to 60 seconds. So when you're logging into something, you'll actually do it. Oh, the picture's there as well. There's SMS and voice-based authentication. So like I said, you might get a text saying enter this code, or you might get someone calling you, or I know, what was it? It's something to do with Google where they actually give you a phone call to confirm who you are. It might be for
Google My Business, they'll sometimes do a verification like that, or they'll do the postcode one as well. They'll actually send you out a code to check that you're at a specific location. It's a type of two-factor authentication as well.
Yeah. And both of the, like all of these, but there is a particular one where it's just this too, so it's a time-based one-time password. So, you know, like when you've forgotten your password, you get an email sent to you going, here's your temp password, you need to change it or log in within the next, 12 hours. So that's just an example of that one there. And then push notifications. So that's sort of pushing through, like I said, to my phone. So Google, my email does this, it pushes through a notification to my phone and it goes, you've just been logged in here, can you confirm this is you? And I say yes or no. If I say no, it's going to take that person out straight away. So that's pretty much all that I was covering under that. Yep.
I've got a pro tip here, and so this is actually something that I've experienced with even within my team here in Tauranga. If you have a Facebook account and you use Facebook, put two-factor authentication on your Facebook account, right? That is the #1 thing you can do to stop your Facebook account being hacked, and that is actually a very common thing because someone can't log in, even if they manage to guess your last pet's name and what your mother's maiden name was and do a password recovery process and manage to get through and get a password reset, they're still not going to be able to log in because they won't have your phone. So, or if you're using SMS-based authentication. So it's really important on as many of these things as you can, not just your website, but also your social media accounts and everything like that. You look to employ this sort of technology. It will save you a lot of heartache if it manages to stop you getting hacked, I'll tell you what.
Definitely. And again, you know, like your customers' data is on, if it's your Facebook business page, your customers' data is on there. They can see who's been interacting with your page, who likes you, and they can take that. They can come into your website and they can take that data. So this is all about just keeping all of that safe. So just a bit around though that you do need to also make sure you've got on your website is also policy and regulations. So these let users know what types of information is involved in every website transaction, tells your users what type of information you acquire from them and how you take care of this. So this obviously helps the users become more aware of what's happening in their transactions, and it was also a great opportunity to show that you can be trusted with their personal data. In some regions, so Europe, I just left my mind what it's called.
The European Union or the GDPR is?
Yeah, GDPR, yeah, that's right. They passed a bill, and that's what it was, which basically meant that anyone who was had e-commerce or was transacting in any way with customers in Europe, was it anywhere else outside of Europe? I can't remember. That you had to...
Yeah, if the customer is in Europe, if the person in question is in Europe, it doesn't matter where the business is, they need to comply with the regulations of where that user is, which is in the EU.
Yeah, and so what that is it's actually just placed in some extra security that you do need to have on your website. So if you are a company that's trading to people in Europe, then it might be a good thing to look over if you haven't already got it. But that's just an example. And honestly, right now, you know, this is evolving, so it wouldn't surprise me if over the next few years we have more security needs that you have to have on a website as well.
Yeah, the general rule of thumb is that so you have a duty of care to look after your customers' information. And if you collect that information, you need to store it appropriately so that it can't be compromised. Essentially, it's just building a bit of trust with your customers as well. And that's the principles behind the European Union regulations. And as Lisa points out, we kind of pretty much predict it's going to be something that we have to be considering in all countries pretty shortly.
Yeah, so in New Zealand, you do have to have a privacy policy. So what that actually covers off is basically what happens if a form submission is made. So you're taking my data for an inquiry, e-commerce security. So what you have secure around my information I give you at a checkout, and also my payments. Also, if you've got an SSL, that's just a simple one in there. And then any other e-commerce policies that you may have through your website. And basically it's just, what you are going to do or not do with the data that you've collected from your customers. So, you know, it's quite simple as I'm not going to sell this data to a business that may be purchasing to then do phone calls, because that's how people get telephone lists, some companies, or it might be that you are doing that. So you have to state that that's what you do. So a really pro tip here, expert tip, the New Zealand Privacy Commissioner has a privacy policy generator available for free on their website. So I actually will make sure we send it out with our email afterwards, actually. It's a great tool, it's simple to use, and it's free, and it's by the Privacy Commissioner who has these rules in place. So probably a best source.
That's a good tip.
And then lastly, just customer data. So you need to think about keeping your customer data safe on and off your website. I think people quite often forget that they sometimes take the data off the website and don't always keep it safe once they do. So not only do all the items we've already covered keep the data safe, but you need to think about, like, you're exporting your customer data into a spreadsheet. That might be because you're importing it into another system to keep it all in one place there, or you know, it's your email marketing list and you're just doing it through another platform. So you need to think about then what you do with that file. Do you delete it straight away once you've done the import? Do you actually file it somewhere safely where not anyone in your company can find it? You know, think about what you're doing with that data, because it still falls under where you got it from. It's the website. So you do have to be careful with that. Another bit is also if you're just taking details down over the phone, You know, quite often, I know I do it, I write little post-its and I leave them all over the place. So think about what you're doing with it. If it is your customers' details, do you have a process that immediately it goes into your customer database and that you shred up the piece of paper and get rid of it? Do you just, you know, do what you have to do and then just scrumple it up and throw it away? You need to be taking into account those sorts of things, because it is basically precious data, and it's how your customers will feel safe. Also, just, you know, leaving invoices out or things around, you know, make sure that you file it as soon as possible. Don't just sort of leave it there and I'm off to have lunch. It's the same with exporting a file. Don't sort of leave your computer unlocked and walk away. You know, just keep that security front of mind. Honestly, once you get into the habit of doing things like this, it's really easy then to just upkeep. Oh, sorry, I didn't have an expert tip there. I was just going to say, if you are keeping it on paper, you've got this info on paper somewhere, and it's actually quite a lot, please make sure you're using a shredder. So that's just very important. You know, if you are someone who for some reason printed out your database because you were doing maybe some posting through it, just make sure you're getting rid of those details in a very safe and secure way. And that's all. Through to questions.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Lisa. We do have a couple of questions here for you. So first and foremost, do you have any suggestions if people have customer data in lots of different places? Like that could be a little bit, that could be common.
Yeah, it is actually, because I mean, I even touched on it, like people might have a website platform, but they actually have a separate email marketing platform. And then on top of that, you might also then have your CRM system. So you're, you know, so you start having all these systems in place. So I guess, first of all, what you should do is really review all the places you have it. And see if they're all necessary. So can I actually get my email marketing through my website? Okay, yes, I can. Do I really need to have a separate platform for that? And so then you start, again, process of elimination and removing the ones that aren't as necessary. If some of it's just manual lists that you have, instead, maybe just see if you can upload it into your website. So like, again, a Zest platform, just because I know it the best, if you have a manual list somewhere, you can just import that into your customer database in your website. And again, it's all in the same place. You could create a customer group, call it manual list, or, you know, offline list, and add them all in there. So then you immediately know where those people came from. It also probably would help if you know, you can check if you got double ups too. But yeah, that's just another place. But I guess essentially as well, if you've started getting into a place where you've really grown the business and you're starting to look at your business processes and all of that, you may need to start looking at automation. So, you know, having your website automatically send the details straight through to your email database, and therefore not having to double up on, you know, exporting a list, importing a list, and then what are you doing with the the export into an Excel sheet that you did.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so once you start getting into some of that automation stuff, it can make things a bit easier as well. Yes. Yeah, once you've got all of this kind of sorted, let's say you've sat down, you've taken a bunch of learning out of the session today and implemented a whole lot of these, and then have things really well secured. How should you be communicating that maybe with your customers, and is that something you should do, and maybe how should you go about it?
Yeah, so like most of it is communicated through your website already, so you don't really need to openly go out and tell everyone, hey, I bought an SSL certificate, my website's safe. Yeah. Okay, so, you know, it's those key things, an SSL certificate, the little lock symbol and the website, the URL address up at the top of your browser, you know, that lets people know that you have an SSL, and also not that horrible message from Google. Your privacy policy should always be at least in the footer of your website, so that people can access it. So again, you know, giving them access to these through your website is positive. In terms of, I guess, you know, moving on as well, email marketing, make sure that you've got an unsubscribe. You know, you do actually need to have unsubscribe if it's promotional, not if it's like just an auto notification. That's fine, but you do need it if it's promotional. But having these tools available for people is just going to keep building that trust over time. But also, if you were a bit larger and there was an incident where something happened and some customer data may have been compromised, you might need to talk about that with someone and see the best approach there.
Yeah, I think it's good to be upfront if there has been an issue, which kind of brings us to the next point. If we've talked about how to prevent it, what happens if it actually has happened? If let's say, I think my website's been hacked, or at least I think it is. What should I do next?
Well, I mean, first of all, call your provider, okay? So get on the phone to them, say you think you've been hacked, and just give them the details of why or where you've seen that. Then work with them to obviously fix that first. So that's sort of the most important thing. But then see if you can get details, and in particular maybe logs, to actually see what was compromised. So sometimes when a website's hacked, all that the person's done, and again, your graffiti analogy here is great, all they've done is actually just left little bits of text in your web pages. They've not actually gone into the database or anything like that. So it's important to actually understand what's happened. But if it does get to a place where, there could have been customer data compromised, it's then best starting to talk to, I guess, more experts in that industry and space. So maybe someone around PR and communications. You would probably need to talk get legal advice around it and what your responsibility and what you need to do there. So I think those are all important. And I think sometimes also taking warnings. So I'll just give an example of about 2 years ago. Again, everything seems to be 2 years today. We had a client who did receive an email saying, we're holding your website to ransom if you don't give us money. So you've got like 2 days or something, or a day, and we'll take your website down unless you give us Bitcoins. Actually, that's what it was. They ignored that. And they got another one saying you've got 12 hours left and all of that, and they ignored it again, and then website was taken offline. And so we got a call going, my website's offline, can you fix it? So we obviously start investigating, and it wasn't even until halfway through the investigation that they went, oh, we did get this email, would this help? And so we read the email, and immediately we knew what the issue was from that. So when you come into a website that's down, you are looking in different areas. So it's just important to sometimes take note of little things like that do happen, and which may prevent something like that. And also just, sometimes I know as a website company, we send out emails saying, hey, you need to make this update or you need to do this change. Again, take that as something to actually action, not just sit there and go, oh, it's all right, I'll do it later. So yeah, I think probably covered off both sides there.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the critical part to realize is there's kind of two different key types of attacks, and that one is where someone's actually managed to get into your website, so they've managed to compromise your password or something like that, and they've got it and they've made some changes and they've got it your customer database. And then there's the other kind of brute force attack, which can sometimes be then follow with an attack on a password, but where the site just gets overloaded with requests and crashes them, and that's called a DDoS attack, which is what we're referring to as well. And so so just taking it really seriously is important, and there's some simple practical steps that's been covered today that's I think are fantastic that can help you kind of work through it. Or just prepare for those sort of things to make sure that they don't become an issue. Thank you, Lisa. I think that's kind of all the time we've got for today. So I'm just we'll kind of wrap things up a little bit and just recap a little bit. Obviously, we've been through a pretty unprecedented time in the last couple of months with COVID-19. It's nice to see things starting to return to normal, but what it has done is it's made it really clear that more businesses need to get involved in online commerce. A lot of them are already doing it, and some of the people that have joined us today, I know, are doing exactly that. And so what we do know about all of this is that showing people that your website is safe to purchase from kind of keeps your customers at ease when they're browsing, and makes it more likely that they'll actually purchase from you. So the opportunity here is that you can get ahead as more customers move to online shopping, so they'll see the need for these security measures. All right, trust is critical online, and being secure and showing that you're secure is a critical part of it. So our prediction is that businesses that have removed as many roadblocks as possible in the buying process will be the most successful, and security is a big part of that. It can be a roadblock. And so our recommendation is that even though this can get really technical, you really just need to get started and make sure you have a conversation with your provider about security, or a trusted expert to help you, so that you've got some sort of procedures and policies in place. And at the very least, ensure that you have an SSL certificate, as that's pretty much the starting point for security online with websites. So Zeald has been a little bit about Zeald before we wrap up. We've been helping businesses with their digital transformation for 20 years. We've helped nearly 15,000 businesses in this space. The critical issue that we ran through with COVID-19 has made the work that we do even more important, and it's forced people to adopt digital technology at a rate faster than ever. If you would like help with your website security, please let us know. We could do a free audit of your website and your security procedures, and if you would like to take advantage of that free session, then we'll be sending out an offer to everyone that has attended today, and you could just make mention that you'd like to catch up with one of our digital business strategists. Zeald also wants to help as many Kiwi businesses as possible survive and thrive in this more digitally focused world. And so we've launched our Get E-commerce movement. Version 2 of this is available now, and you can apply to get a free e-commerce website set up. The offer also comes with 12 months worth of zero-rated hosting, with the only charge being a 2% success fee, which goes back into helping fund the development of these sites for the next business. If you or anyone you know wants to get selling online, go to zeald.com and you can register there. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, the 24th of June, and it's Conquering Your Search Results in 2020. SMEs and new businesses, please register at zeald.com. You're going to love the session that we've got coming up. So go along there and register today. A special thanks to our guest speaker, Lisa. Fantastic as always. Thank you very much for your time today. That is actually all the time we have for folks. So if you know of anyone that might benefit from attending these in the future, please feel free to share the register page. Thank you again, Lisa. Did you want to say anything before we say?
I was going to say thanks to you as well, Jara,
Cool.
for moderating as usual.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Cheers, everyone. Have a good day. Good luck.